Today, we're going to talk about how to identify problems in your mix. We're going to talk about how to find the problem, how to make sure you found the correct problem. We've all been there, right? You think you know what the problem is. You go down this rabbit trail, spend 20, 30 minutes solving said problem, only to realize, oh, that wasn't the problem, or it wasn't a problem at all. This will save you a whole bunch of time. Then once we find the problem, at the end of the video, I'm going to share with you 3 ways to solve any problem in a mix. You ready? Let's dive in. By the way, in case you didn't know this, all of mixing is problem solving. That's all mixing is. Once you solve all the problems, your mix is done. One of my favorite books and movies is The Martian, and one of my favorite quotes is where he says, if you solve enough problems, you get to come home. Now, we're not stranded on a planet 15 light minutes away, but mixing can sometimes feel that difficult. So if you can think of it in terms of, I only have to figure out the next problem to solve and then just keep solving problems until they're all solved, it makes mixing feel less like this big hairy monster and more like something that we can actually tackle. But you need a system. You need a step-by-step process to guide you through mixing. Otherwise, you'll just find yourself mixing a song for forever and never actually reach the finish line. I have a process that I use for every mix that I do. It involves 5 steps. You can steal this process if you want. I've made a guide that walks you through that process. It'll take you about 20 minutes to read, and then you're off to the races and can have a better, faster mixing experience as soon as tonight. Go get your copy at 5stepmix.com. Before we dive into my favorite tool to use to help me identify problems quickly, we got to talk about the bigger picture issue here. If you're having a hard time identifying problems in your mixes, chances are you've got a listening problem. You're not very good at listening, so you're not going to be very good at identifying problems. How do we solve that problem? If you would like to get to a point where you can listen to 5 seconds of a piece of music and can instantly spot the biggest problem in the mix, that's completely possible. You've just got to put in the reps and develop these things right here. It's not something you're born with. It's something anyone with the ability to hear can develop. And a big secret to this, by the way, isn't go mix 1,000 songs. It's actually go listen to a lot of great music in the mix position in your studio. If I listen to really great music in my studio for an hour while I'm doing email or whatever, then I pull up my latest mix. If that latest mix isn't that great and has some obvious problems, I'm going to be better able to spot those problems because I just got done listening to really well-mixed, well-produced, well-balanced music. So the things that are out of balance in my mix are going to stick out like a sore thumb. Now, I'm going to push back on some feedback that I get pretty regularly on this. If you want to be a musician, a producer, a mix engineer, release your own great sounding music, but you don't listen to other great sounding music, you are shooting yourself in the foot. It's like an author who never reads books. You're not going to get good at writing because you don't consume writing. Now, I know there's this thing, and I see it all the time, that people will say, I'm an artist. I don't need to listen to anyone else because I'm completely unique. I don't want to sound like them. That's a load of horse crap, okay? Every great artist, every great painter, sculptor, guitarist has influences, people that they listen to, that they stole ideas from, so to speak, and then wrapped all those different influences into what makes them who they are musically. If you are in a vacuum and the only influence you have is yourself, you're not going to be very good. You might be unique, but unique ain't good. I used to love watching that show Shark Tank, and someone would come in and say, I've got a business idea that no one's ever done before. And they think that's a really great thing, but you can see it on the faces of all the sharks. They're thinking, okay, if no one's ever done this before, there's a really good chance nobody wants it. That's why no one's done it before. So if you're in that camp of thinking, I'm an artist, I don't listen to other people's music because I'm going to make something completely unique, grow up a little bit and realize that you have something to learn from other people. I do this in business. I get better at my business when I study and learn from other people and how they run their businesses, especially people who are better than me, who are further down the road than me, who know how to do some things that I haven't figured out how to do yet. I could sit here, and I've had seasons where I sit here and fold my arms and say, I'm going to figure this out on my own, just like a 2-year-old who can't put on their own coat, but they'll throw a fit if you try to help them put on their coat. It's ridiculous. It's dumb. Don't do that. Instead, engage in a little bit of humility and realize that there's a lot of wisdom out there for you to gain if you can put your insecurities aside, if you can stop being threatened by the existence of people who are better than you, and you can choose to learn from them rather than avoid and reject them, your music's going to be amazing. And no, you're not going to sound just like them because you're not them. You are you. Your music is going to sound like you. And that's a beautiful, wonderful thing. I have all kinds of influences. My music has little bits and pieces of a lot of the things I've listened to over the last 39 years. And guess what? My music is unique to me, and I love what I do. So, sermon over. Get better at listening. It'll expose you to great ideas, great mixes, great productions, great recordings, great songwriting, great artistry, great performances. I may have said performances already. And all of that gets absorbed into your brain, and these ears start to develop and develop and develop until you hear something that has problems in it, and the problems are almost visual. It's so obvious. And then you just jump in and fix them, and you're off to the races. All right, here is my secret button that helps me find problems in the mix. Are you ready for it? There it is, right there. Did you guess it? Leave a comment. Did you guess this was it? Or did you think it was solo? Mute and solo are like mortal enemies. I like mute a lot more than solo for this reason. So why is this? Why do I like the mute button for finding problems? Because it helps me make sure I've found the right problem. I have this subtractive approach to music in general. Doesn't mean my way is the only way, but this has worked well for me for the last 20 years, so I'm going to stick with it. It's this idea that if there's a problem, more than likely it's something that needs to be taken away, not I need to add more stuff to it. Or at least that's where my head goes. The first option for me is what can I remove to make this better? And then the second question will be, okay, what can I add if there's nothing that needs to be removed? 9 times out of 10, the problems I'm facing in a mix is a problem that I need to remove something that's problematic versus add something on that's missing. So the mute button is like the ultimate removal tool, right? Because it can mute a track or a whole section of tracks and let me hear what it sounds like without those things. That's what I'm talking about here. Let's jump into Studio One and I'll actually let you hear what this sounds like. All right, let me clean up my window a little bit. So here is a song I produced a while back. Recorded, these blue tracks are electric guitar. So we got about, 8 electric guitars throughout the song. They don't all play throughout the song, but like we're about to play a chorus and there's 4 guitars playing. So I want to play for you, let's just keep it simple. I'll play for you just the guitars and just see for a second if you can hear what's kind of the big problem with just these guitars in general. Okay, here we go. In case you're not familiar, that's my song, Whitewash. I love that song. It was so fun to record. Let's listen to that, just that beginning of the chorus again with everything in. What do you hear on the guitars, or just in general, what do you hear that's a little bothersome to you? All right, let me walk you through what I hear, and what I hear is the problem. There could be any number of things that you might have picked out. You're not right or wrong, but what I hear in this mix is there's a muddiness to the guitars that I don't like. Because the bass guitar itself is holding down all the low end. My general philosophy for rock mixes especially is kick drum, bass guitar, handle the low end. Everybody else just get out of the way. One of the biggest problems I hear in people's mixes is they've got all their tracks contributing to the low end and it just makes a muddy mess. I'm not saying high pass everything. I'm saying just think in terms of the 2 main actors in the whole low end category are the bass guitar and the kick drum. Everybody else can get up out of there, okay? So when I listen to these guitars, I'm hearing this just low-end grossness that makes it almost sounds like the bass, but the bass is muted. So let's listen to those guitars again, see if you can pick it out. There's this like thing that's happening. And that comes through in the entire mix and makes it sound a little muddy, but it's especially true here when I listen to just the guitars. So what do? We talked about the mute button being our friend. Do we mute the guitars? No, of course. So muting the buses is helpful for identifying where is this problem coming from, big picture. And what I mean by this, you say, how do you find a problem by muting it? Because we mute it and we see if the problem goes away. That's the big takeaway. If you suspect something is the problem, then mute it and see if the problem goes away. Because here's the dirty little secret. You may be right about the problem. For example, there's a muddy thing going on, but you may be wrong about where it's coming from. So before you jump in with your EQ or whatever to solve that muddy problem, make sure you found the problem itself. So if we listen to these guitars with the drums and bass, first thing I'm going to do is mute the bass and see if there's still some muddiness there. If not, then I know it's the bass that's the muddy problem. Let's try that. Now, it's honestly not too bad because I recorded it well, but there is still a little bit of muddiness in there. So let's go and check out these guitars. There's only 4 guitars playing at this current moment in time. Which of these is causing the mud? We can solo to find out, which is somewhat valid, or we can mute until the problem goes away. Let's do that one, all right? I'm just going to mute one at a time until the problem disappears. Did you spot it? Did you spot the problem? I'll do it one more time. Now, your initial thought might have been, oh, it's the lead, but that's just because the lead's really loud. It's actually not boomy at all. It's just mildly obnoxious. The culprit, of course, was the fuzz track. It's always the fuzz track. Here's what that track sounds like by itself, just so you can hear. Just straight from the 90s. So what did I do in this mix? Well, I realized, man, this fuzz is making everything muddy. I like the grit that it's given me, right? I'm getting like Smashing Pumpkins, Bush vibes. I don't want to lose that. That's cool. But it also is just muddying things up. So I ended up in the actual mix of this using this EQ curve to get rid of the low rumble, emphasize some of the high mids, and even a little bit of the mid-range to make it work a lot better. Completely kind of changed the tone, kept the character, but prevented it from being so muddy. So now it's not interfering with the bass guitar at all. The guitars together now occupy a good chunk of mid-range and upper mid-range without messing with the low end. So there you go. With that one EQ on that one track, we now have guitars that get out of the way, like we said, and then we add drums and bass back in, and now the bass is full, the muddiness seems to have left the mix. Okay, so real quickly, let's talk about the 3 ways to solve the problem once you find it, aka how to solve just about any problem in a mix. First, you have to identify what type of problem it is. So we found the problem. In this instance, it was a little muddiness in the guitars. Then we have to identify what type of problem it is. And there are 3 basic types of problems that I found in mixes. The first is it's a source problem. If you followed me for more than a day, you've heard me say get it right at the source. Your mixes will only be as good as your recordings. So it could be a source problem, meaning the performance itself was just not good. It was out of tune, out of time. It was boring. It could have been the wrong part. So you recorded it well, but it just wasn't the right part for the song, and that's never going to sound good in the mix. Or it could be the recording itself. So the way you captured the audio isn't working. Now, there are things we can fix in the mix, but there are a lot of things you can't. And the ideal scenario is tracks come in sounding almost already mixed, and then we can do our little bits and pieces of mixing to make it sound incredible together. But if it's got huge, massive problems, you really have a recording problem, not a mixing problem. All right, so problem number one is it's a source problem. If we determine, it's not a source problem, or the person who played that part is no longer with us, so I have to deal with it even though there is a source problem, then we move on to the two other types of problem, which are, one of them is it's a level problem. This one is so simple that people will skip over it entirely. It could be that the thing you're having an issue with is just at the wrong level. So for example, I've had lots of mixes where I'm thinking, man, the bass guitar is muddy. Man, and I'll go in and like pull in an EQ and start messing around with it, and it's just not working. 20 minutes later, I undo all the EQs I added, and then I just take the fader and pull it down 3 dB. Suddenly it sounds amazing. It was a level problem, not a EQ problem. That is so important that it's actually the second step of my 5-step mix process, which I mentioned earlier, link in the description if you want that guide. It's to do just the static mix. Just get the levels right before you start messing with EQs and things like that, because if you don't have the level right, you're going to be fighting yourself the entire mix because the thing is just too loud or just too quiet, and you're trying to solve a level problem with a compressor or an EQ or something equally as silly. Now, if there could be a level problem where it's the right level, but certain notes are too loud or too quiet, then you can use a tool like compression or maybe automation to balance out those levels. That's one of the ways where compression shines. The vocal sings too loud in one spot and too quiet in others. If we smack it with a compressor, both the quiet and the loud parts are closer in volume, so it gives you a more consistent level across the mix. Compression's great for that. And then the third type of problem is it's a frequency problem, meaning there's too much of one group of frequencies or perhaps even more than one group of frequencies. And it could also be that there's not enough highs, for example. But typically, like I said, I'm thinking in terms of subtractive before I'm thinking in terms of additive. So if you have a frequency problem, the easy solution is something like an EQ or maybe a dynamic EQ that only turns down certain frequencies when they become a problem, such as sibilants, things like that, or a multiband compressor, similar vibe, but works on bigger chunks of frequencies. By the way, whatever problem you're facing in the mix, it's almost always a balance problem. There's either a level balance where this is just too loud, this is too quiet, a frequency balance where there's too much of these frequencies, not enough of these, but it's typically it could be a panning balance. It's too left heavy. It needs to be more balanced in the stereo field. If you can think in simple terms like level, balance, frequencies, and by the way, is the source any good or not? You will transform your mixes almost overnight because you're no longer chasing down problems that aren't problems. You're stepping back and figuring out what the actual problem is, and then you're solving it in the simplest way possible, and you're getting better results. Don't believe me? Go try it on a mix. Find a mix that's been giving you trouble. Try this approach, and you'll notice you'll get a better mix in less time. If you like this video, you'll love this video on 19 mixing tips I wish I knew 20 years earlier. Thanks for watching. See ya.